Good evening, everyone, and thank you for listening to the Futurati podcast, where we dive into how emerging technologies will impact the world and your bank account. I'm Trent Fowler, and joining me as always is my co-host, Thomas Fry. Thomas and I are futurists, keynote speakers, and consultants with decades of experience in analyzing trends and communicating new developments to audiences across the world. Reach out to us at futuratipodcast.com/contact-futurati if you'd like to hire us for consulting, to speak at one of your events, or to advertise on our podcast. Thomas, we just wrapped up an interview with oceanographer Nathaniel Harmon. What do you think? What were your big takeaways from the episode?
Yeah, well, this seems very logical. What he's working on is the idea of creating a power plant on a ship that floats in the ocean and just using the temperature differential from the warm water on the surface and the cold water underneath. And that's just a thermoelectric process for generating electricity from that temperature differential. I think that has huge potential. And if you could actually build a freestanding, a free floating power plant on the ocean that runs off the water, boy, I think you could sell thousands of these units for a boatload of money, pun intended.
There you go.
And I think you have something there. He's got very limited view on how the rest of the world works, but he's very focused on this, and I think there's huge potential there.
I was pretty amazed. I'd never heard of OTEC, the technology he's describing, where you harvest energy from the temperature differential between surface level water and deeper stratas of water. It's apparently a fairly old technique, and
it's the thermoelectric chips that you can buy work on that principle. It's you can have the temperature differential one way and it generates power that way. So it's the Peltier effect one way, and it's a Seebeck effect the other way. This has been around for a long time, but I haven't heard it used in the ocean, though. And so that was new and different for me.
I haven't either. And I thought that his description of the ways in which that could power a bunch of ocean-based industries is really compelling. I mean, as everyone knows, the ocean is the biggest part of the planet. It covers a vast fraction of the surface area of the Earth. There's a lot out there. Most of it we're not using to do anything at all. It might as well be a desert for all that we use it. And ever since I read, I can't remember what it's called now, but there was a science fiction story which was essentially just looking at the near future development of ocean-based industries. They were doing things like farming whales, and they had manufacturing out in the ocean, things like that, to make up for food shortages and that sort of thing. And I've been fascinated by the idea ever since. And he's right. One of the big problems with ocean-based industries are the same problems with space-based industries, is that you need that power, and it's so cost prohibitive to transport it out to where the manufacturing is happening that none ever does happen. But if you can make it in situ somehow with OTEC or a similar with a similar engineering technique, then you've solved that problem. And I thought his description of the technology, his sales pitch for it, and the fact that he wants to use this to make Earth a Kardashev I civilization was really, really compelling.
Yeah, it's pretty good, but he also needs Starlink to make it work. I mean, if you're in the middle of the ocean, you need satellite communication. So
yeah, he does not take a great view of space-based industries, but we'll let you, the listeners, get into that with the episode. So we hope you enjoy it, and drop us a line if you do. Tonight, we're joined by Nathaniel Harmon. Nathaniel attended the University of Hawaiʻi Manoa for both his undergraduate and graduate education, ultimately receiving an MS in Marine Geology and Geochemistry. In 2018, Nathaniel founded Blockchain Solutions Hawaiʻi as Hawaii's Bitcoin Helpdesk in an effort to assist individuals, legislators, and businesses as they integrate with Bitcoin. In 2021, Nathaniel combined his formal education with his passion for Bitcoin by founding OceanBit Energy, The goal of OceanBits is to use Bitcoin mining to solve the economies of scale problem that has plagued ocean thermal energy conversion for over 100 years. If you enjoyed this interview, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends. And don't forget to check out our website, futureaudiopodcast.com. Nathaniel, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Trent.
Let's hear a little bit about your background, your interests, and what brought you to working on the problems that you're working on today.
Yeah, so I'm an oceanographer, I guess, an environmental scientist. I specialized in marine geology and geochemistry, and received a master's in marine geology and geochemistry from the University of Hawaiʻi. And I've been into Bitcoin since about 2013 and 2017 professionally.
Wow.
That's bad.
So you were buying Bitcoin when it was like 12 cents, huh?
I wish.
It's been some time. It's been some time since it's been 12 cents.
I wish.
Tell us a little bit about the Bitcoin endeavors you're involved in. So your background didn't cover as much about the mining operations you're doing or just the Bitcoin Council that you founded for Hawaiian policymakers. Walk us through a little bit about your Bitcoin background.
Yeah, so I have two companies. The first company I founded back in 2018 or so was this business, Blockchain Solutions Hawaiʻi. I'm a Bitcoin maximalist, but turns out when you have Bitcoin in the name of your company, the banks don't really like it. But so I had multiple bank accounts shuttered, and then we switched it up to Blockchain Solutions Hawaiʻi, and bank accounts still going strong. So, even though I think the banks like the scams more than they like the actual technology. But BSH was a consulting firm, software development, Bitcoin-based development. And we work with the state of Hawaii through the DFI and the Department of Financial Institutions, the Hawaii Technology Development Corporation. We are on the I'm on the advisory board of their Digital Currency Innovation Lab. And yeah, so we just did some advising that, Hawaii banned Bitcoin. Well, not banned, but effectively banned Bitcoin back in 2015. And the DFI wanted to create a sandbox program to allow companies to come to Hawaii. There was like this dual requirement where for every, dollar of Bitcoin you held on someone's behalf, you had to have that equivalent amount of dollars. So, if Bitcoin goes from $1,000 to $20,000, well, now you have to somehow come up with 19 extra $1,000 to hold. And that's a pretty ridiculous thing. But Hawaii and the DFI created the sandbox program, and they needed advisors, and they reached out to me and a friend of mine who really had the only Bitcoin-based businesses in the state. And so we've been advising them.
So I'm curious, going back to what you said about the banks banning you because you had a Bitcoin in your name. I mean, do they have a list of words that are banned in the banking world? I'm curious about that. I mean, if you have like some of the 4-letter words that I'm assuming that you can't have that in your name either. So I'm just curious.
My business, drugs are us, just cannot seem to get banked no matter where I go.
I don't know what it was. Here in Hawaii, we have our own banking system. So there's no, where are you guys located?
Colorado.
So you guys have like Bank of America, Citibank, Truist, right? All the major national banks, along with, of course, your local bank branches. But here in Hawaii, there are no Bank of Americas or Citibanks or Wells Fargos. It's all Bank of Hawaii, First Hawaiian Bank, Hawaiian National Bank. So we have our own local kind of banking system.
Okay.
And they were just not equipped to deal with Bitcoin or anything like that. So that's at least the assumption. But they can deny bank accounts to whoever they want. I mean, that's private banking for you.
Yeah. So the cannabis growers out here have problems with getting bank accounts as well.
Many similar
Same
problems.
here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe they should change their name to Blockchain as well then, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cannablock. So you said that you are a Bitcoin maximalist, and there's been all kinds of debate and tumult in the Bitcoin community and the crypto community more broadly about this term and what it means. How do you define a Bitcoin maximalist?
That Bitcoin is the only commodity by nature of being that 0 to 1 moment. Before Bitcoin was discovered, I like to use discovered rather than invented, because it would have come about because it's the only way to do it. Before Bitcoin, nothing on the internet or digital had any value, because you could just copy and replace it ad infinitum. And Bitcoin was that 0 to 1 moment, right? That we make fun of him, but Laszlo, right, when he bought those pizzas, that was the 0 to 1 moment. That was the moment that Bitcoin gained value, and it's a extremely powerful. It sucks to look back and go, oh man, $500 million on 2 Papa John's pizzas, but that moment gave Bitcoin value. And by nature of that being that 0 to 1 moment, everything else now kind of can have something to value it against. And Bitcoin is the only commodity, and everything else is just a security. If you have a pre-mine and a founder and a lead team that raised VC capital to build your coin, and then you masquerade as a decentralized protocol, that's just a security. And I have no problem with other networks. I'm kind of against the way that they market themselves. I think the marketing is predatory, and if it's a shit, as long as you don't lie that you're centralized and subject to the whim of the market, and you're controlled by a handful of guys, and you gave 70% of your tokens out before the network actually launched. As long as you just say we're a security, that's fine. That's fine with me. But it's when they try to use the credibility of the Bitcoin protocol to say, oh, no, we're a decentralized commodity, that's where I take umbrage.
You said something interesting. You said that Bitcoin would have been discovered anyway because it's the only way to do it. Can you talk us through that perspective? What exactly do you mean by
that? It's the only way to create digital value. The combination of the 4 technologies. You have the proof of work, you have the peer-to-peer network, you have the coin itself, and you have the blockchain, right? Those are just 4 tech. Satoshi didn't invent any single one of those. He just put them together in a way that no one had thought of before. So someone would have inevitably thought of that. And as we know, because Bitcoin is still around today, that was the way to create digital value. People had tried in the past and failed. And only the combination of those 4 technologies worked.
Now, how do you feel about something like Ethereum? So Vitalik Buterin famously forked the Bitcoin code because he wanted to do more things with smart contracts. You said you're okay with the alternative projects as long as they call themselves a security. I believe last I checked, the SEC had weighed in and said Ethereum is a security. I don't know if they had the same judgment on Bitcoin, but how do you feel about a project like that? I realize maybe taken you off the scope of the conversation a little bit, but do you have any enthusiasm for smart contract technologies, what it makes possible? Do you think it's all a giant shitcoin?
Well, Ethereum is a security, but it's masquerading. It's, as not a security, so that makes it a shitcoin. I mean, are there interesting things happening in the field? Sure, but none of them are being honest about their marketing. I mean, Ethereum is just a company. What was it? 70% of all the Ethereum were created before the first Ethereum block was created, and given to the founders and their VC firms. There was a pre-mine, pre-sale, and now they're moving to proof of stake, which just entrenches those initial holders, right? Proof of work is the only thing that can really secure a decentralized network. Ethereum can change its code whenever it wants. They run up against the the Ice Age or whatever, or the difficulty bomb, and they say, well, fuck it, we'll change it. Well, we'll just move that. We'll just keep moving it back as much as we want, which means it has it means nothing, right? If you can just arbitrarily move it, it means nothing. And they can put in a new difficulty bomb and move it or fork the code however they want. That's a company. If they just said, we're a company, this is our product, I'd be okay with it. I mean, it would be a company I wouldn't invest in, and a company that's really not worth anything, because you can do everything Ethereum can do with an Excel spreadsheet. And you can do it a lot fast. SQL is a great technology. It's a great database. We learned what happens when a smart contract fucks up. They just roll it back, right? So is that, I mean, I guess that answers the question. Is it a shit coin? Yeah, kind of.
Okay. Well, we'll see how Reddit feels about that when we post that clip.
Shifting gears. Now you're using blockchain in your field of oceanography. How can you explain how that's being applied?
Sure. So, I'm using, Bitcoin. Turns out that, are you guys familiar by any chance with the Kardashev scale? I guess this is a future focused podcast. So you're familiar with the, what's type 1?
Is that where you harness all the energy that's output by your star?
That arrives at your planet. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So 45% of that energy that's output by the star and, by the sun and arrives here on planet Earth falls in the tropical oceans of the world. And outside of some minor, near shore oil exploration and fishing, there are no major industries. So almost half of all the energy we have access to is being wasted. It's just not being used, right? So if we want to ever get to type 1, that means we need to go to that energy and then harness it. And there's really only one way to do that. It's called ocean thermal energy conversion. And the way that OTEC works is you have, essentially it turns the ocean into a giant solar panel, and it uses the difference in temperature between the surface water, which is heated by the sun, and deep cold water, right? It's very, it's freezing cold in, at about 800 to 1,000 meters deep. And so you can run a heat engine off of that difference in temperature. So just like geothermal uses the heat of the planet, the geo, ocean thermal uses the heat of the ocean. And it's the only way to tap into that. Again, 45% of all the energy we receive from the sun lands in the middle of the ocean. And it's been around. It's not even new, and it's crazy to me that nobody's heard of it. It's been around for 140 years or so. It was actually first theorized by a French physicist based on the work of Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Yep.
And, it was, I think it was 1881, was first, proposed. And the first OTEC plant was built in 1930 in Cuba. And since then, there have been, 13 OTEC plants built around the world. The issue, as with most renewable energy technologies, is there's a economies of scale problem. And no one has been able to solve the economies of scale for 100+ years. People like Nikola Tesla worked on this. And still to this day, we use the contributions that Nikola Tesla made in everyday life. That's how OTEC is done. But no one's been able to solve this, economies of scale problem. And turns out Bitcoin is the answer. Proof of work is the answer.
Can we back up a little bit and get clear on the technical fundamentals? So you referenced a heat engine earlier. I understand that the sun heats the surface layer of water. There's a delta T with the deeper strata of water. I'm not super clear on how you get energy out. So I mean, like, what exactly are you doing at that point? Are you pumping it up or running it through a turbine? How are you actually getting energy out of that differential?
You're running a Rankine cycle. It's just a basic heat engine. You have a working fluid, in this case, ammonia. The warm water boils the ammonia. The cold water condenses it. You run it in a loop. I mean, it's the most basic, engine imaginable.
Okay, so you've got the ammonia. you boil it with hot water. Okay, and then what? You run it through some turbines or something. I mean, I can't get over this. Like, okay, so you run it through some turbines. They spin. They generate electricity. They run back down through some piping to, I don't know, 2,000 feet under the surface, whatever it is, right? It condenses again, and then you pump it back up. Is that right?
So you're pumping up the cold water from below to closer, so you don't have less piping. But it's a kind of just a big ass straw. You bring the cold water up to the surface. You do the run your Rankine cycle on a offshore. So it's done offshore. It's not onshore like hydropower or geothermal, where you do you have land use changes. This is done on a ship. So when I say plant, what I really mean is plant ship. It's offshore based. You have a big straw, essentially, going down a kilometer into the ocean, and you move the water. You pump water up to the surface. You run your Rankine cycle, and then you return it to a neutral depth. You mix it with the warm water, and then you have a wastewater. So the fuel is water, and the waste product is just slightly colder water because you're extracting energy.
There's enough energy left over after you've run the pumps, which move the water up, right? So there's still enough there for you to capture.
So actually moving the water from depth to the surface is cost almost nothing in terms of energy, right? It's moving it above the surface and pumping it through the system that uses a lot of the energy. But it's a lot of water. So parasitic losses are about 30%. So, your pumps, ship, all the things that you need to run a power plant ends up being about 30% for the parasitic losses.
And that's all in. That's the boat. That's everything.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good margin, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the biggest untapped source of energy on the planet. The sun does a damn good job, and water has the highest heat capacity of any substance in the universe. It's pretty amazing. It's why we're all alive, right? Because of all the magical properties of water. So not only is the surface of the ocean a solar panel, it's also a battery combined, right? The the water stays warm overnight. It doesn't get freezing cold. And you can, I mean, it's a lot of water. It's a very low temp Rankine cycle. So, you just need a lot of fuel.
And then I'm curious about the logistics of moving the energy, right? So are you charging batteries on this ship? Because it's well known that one of the problems with energy economics is just how hard it is to transmit the energy. So you can't export it very well. That's one of the reasons that Bitcoin mining is so promising as a technology for subsidizing things like renewable energies. I mean, we'll get to the Bitcoin part in a second, but just
so at scale,
considering the
at scale, like 100 megawatt plus utility scale power, you have a plant ship moored offshore with a high voltage cable that connects it to land. At that scale, at the large utility scale, that cable, about 10-kilometer cable, is a manageable portion of the budget.
Okay. So how does this tie into Bitcoin then?
So there have been 14 small-scale research facilities built over the last 100 years. And the reason that there have been 14 small-scale research facilities built over the last 100 years is that it's understood that at 100 megawatt utility scale, the energy is cheap and virtually infinitely renewable. The issue is that you have to first demonstrate it at the prototype scale, right? You have to scale it up to, something that resembles utility scale, but is small enough, for testing. So it's prototype scale. Think somewhere in the range 5 to 10 megawatts scale. And the issue is,
could you contextualize that for us? Like, I'm not sure what 100 megawatts really means. Is that like, what a city would use? Is that what you'd expect a utility to pump out? How big is that?
That is, so as far as the size of the ship, that's about a Panamax, the new Panamax tanker, that hauls around shipping containers. So it's about a Panamax size. And yeah, that's again, utility scale power. So something that would supply a city about that. So here on Oahu, we use Oahu has about 1 million people. So 100 megawatts and we've got 1 million people and about 2 gigawatts of capacity. So yeah, that's about 50 to 100,000 people. Base power.
Okay. And part of the problem with all this is that getting it big enough to test reliably is just, it's a whole thing. You've got to build something big enough to cart these containers around the ocean and also produce enough power for, a moderately sized city in order to.
Well, you're not taking containers with you, right?
No,
it's not like
just the size of the vessel. I mean, it's got to be pretty big to test, in other words.
Hello, this is Trent Fowler, co-host of the Futurati podcast. One of the most common pieces of marketing advice I've come across is to know your audience and give them what they want. One difficulty in podcasting is that it's actually pretty hard to do this. None of the major platforms give us any way to reach out to you, our listeners, to find out what you enjoy about the Futurati podcast and what you'd like to see done differently. So we've decided to record this commercial and ask you directly to reach out to us. Head over to futuratipodcast.com, go to the contact page, and drop us a line. Tell us about your favorite and least favorite episodes, what you'd like to see us cover in the future, and anything else you want us to know. We produce this show for you, and we want your advice so we can make it even better. Thank you.
Yeah, so you have to build like a 10 megawatt test facility to prove scale, to prove that it's, it'll operate continuously for, 30 years, but you don't have to run it for 30 years. Just you have to show that it runs continuously. At the small scale research facilities, like the first grid connected OTEC plant was built in Hawaii on the Big Island back in 2015. It's 100 kilowatts. So, pretty small scale. and it was just it was built for testing heat exchangers, and it's just too grossly unprofitable to run for long periods of time. So it doesn't. And at 10 megawatts, that's the problem, is that if you were to, at if you were to sell that energy to the grid, there's no grid on Earth that could support the cost of that energy. It's somewhere like 50 cents per kilowatt hour, which is a ridiculous cost. Here in Hawaii, we have the highest energy costs in the nation at 33 cents per kilowatt hour, and nobody's going to agree to a 20 cent per kilowatt hour increase, right? And so that's really the nature of the problem, is that it's at 10 megawatts, it is too big for research funding, but the cost of energy is too high to sell to the grid. And so no one's willing to take that risk.
Okay.
But we think we've figured that out. So if nobody's gonna buy that energy, right, on the grid, well, now there's no need for that 10-kilometer high voltage cable. So there's $40 to $100 million that you just slash off the capex. And well, now that you're not tethered to land by that cable, you don't need a mooring to hold this plant ship in place. So there's tens of millions and years of permitting costs. And like I said, in 1930, the first OTEC plant was built in Cuba. And a few months into operation, well, they didn't have great hurricane tracking at the time. So this thing gets totaled, right? Complete financial loss. Well, you can avoid that, hurricane risk. Now that you're neither tethered nor moored in place, you can take this plant ship somewhere that doesn't have hurricanes. And turns out the best place for that is the equator. Hurricane, they call it the doldrums for a reason. There's no hurricanes at the equator. They don't cross the equator. And it also, as it turns out, that the efficiency of energy generation of OTEC scales with the square of that delta T, the difference in temperature between that, the sea surface and the deep ocean. And so here in Hawaii,
the hotter the water.
So here in Hawaii, we have sea surface temperature, year-round average around 26 degrees Celsius. But at the equator, you can find places 32 degrees Celsius. So, a nice bath. And it turns out that that's 6 degrees of, extra delta T that you're getting equates to about 70% more energy. So you can, cut your capex drastically, increase your energy efficiency. And the interesting part about Bitcoin is that one of the waste products of this whole process is freezing cold water, which is, there are two major cost components to Bitcoin mining: the energy going into the machines and then removing that energy from the system, cooling. So you get one of those cost components completely for free because you have an unlimited amount of freezing cold water. So you can, for no extra cost, you can cool these Bitcoin miners down to 8 degrees Celsius. And so you're getting overclocking, and the cooler they are, the less energy they use. So you can push them harder and use less energy at the same time. And it's because of that we believe that OTEC is the most efficient way to produce Bitcoin, as far as all the energy sources go. Once we hit scale, say 100 megawatt plus OTEC, you're looking at sub 5 cent energy costs with free cooling, which makes it extremely competitive. So we're going to attempt to do the 10 megawatt prototype, mining Bitcoin in the middle of the ocean.
So do you have your own Bitcoin mining operation currently, or is this?
The last Bitcoin mining operation I did was in my office at UH Manoa, where I had access to free electricity. Here in Hawaii, it's 33 cents per kilowatt hour. Unless you're getting
Okay.
free electricity somewhere, it's not very profitable to mine Bitcoin
Okay.
here.
Right.
But then, so we set up rigs in my office, and then we started paying our, our other graduate students to take rigs and put them in their office. So that's really where my first experience with Bitcoin mining came from.
Okay.
That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. So then you made tons of money, but you couldn't put it in any bank because they wouldn't take your money, huh?
Pretty much, yeah.
All right.
Well, so where's the project now? You said you're working on the prototype. What phase are you in?
Yep. So we have a 4-phase plan. We've partnered with Mackay Ocean Engineering, who built that first grid-connected OTEC plant on the Big Island. And so we're going to do the testing on the Big Island, just prove everything out, work out whatever kinks there are. Nobody's ever fully integrated an energy supply with Bitcoin before. Most of the operations are just co-located. You drop some containers in or build stand up a data center with Bitcoin in it next to an energy source. This is a full cycle integration. Then the first of its kind, not just of OTEC, but of any, and there's going to be kinks to work out. So we're going to use the existing infrastructure at Nelha to test it out, see what we can do with that unlimited cold water supply. It's cheaper to use existing infrastructure. Problem is that existing infrastructure was not designed with Bitcoin mining efficiency in mind. It was designed to test heat exchangers for the F-35s, the airplanes. So with the knowledge that we gained from doing, essentially a benchtop OTEC, we want to move into phase 2 with the construction of the first OTEC Bitcoin mining container system. So fully optimized for, OTEC and Bitcoin mining. And, half the container is energy generation. The other half is Bitcoin mining to soak up all that energy. And from there, that design that we built, that container that we'll test at NELHA, which is the Natural Energy Laboratory of Hawaii Authority. It's on the Big Island of Hawaii. They have this cold water pipe already installed, which is, of course, is one of the biggest costs. So we're going to use that to test that container. And then from there, we just scale that design to 10 megawatts. So that's phase 3, where we containerize the whole process, 10 megawatts of it, stick it on a barge, go to the equator, the middle of the ocean, and mine Bitcoin to prove OTEC once and for all. And then we're going to, we'll build 100 megawatt plants after that.
Are you enjoying this episode of the Futurati podcast? If so, please like it, give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and share it with your friends. By far, the best way to help us grow is to spread the word on social media, which will expose our content to more people and help us continue to bring you interviews with world-leading experts in AI, quantum computing, cryptocurrencies, and so much more. Thank you in advance.
So after mining Bitcoin, what's a good application for this? There's other uses
Sell it to the
for
grid.
Power.
Powering
Okay.
the earth.
Yeah. So we've identified 1,000 carbon-based plants around the globe that are in the OTEC viability zone, and replace those is a pretty good start. Replacing those, it's it's 300 gigawatts of capacity that you could theoretically replace with OTEC.
Okay.
It is remarkable. How does the viability of this scheme interact with the price of Bitcoin? Is it just the higher it is, the more viable it is? Are you at all worried about the volatility of Bitcoin price trying to scope these projects out, get them funded, that sort of thing?
Yeah, scoping Bitcoin mining prices and difficulty and profitability 6 years into the future is a difficult task that we are we are currently involved in. But it doesn't really make that much of a difference. In general, it's kind of it fluctuates, but profitability generally, returns to some mean value. If you have a halving, it cuts in half, your profitability cuts in half, but as time goes on, it comes back to that normal. But it's not really about making that 10 megawatt OTEC plant profitable. It's about making it not a complete financial loss as it would be without Bitcoin, right? De-risking that whole situation. Nobody's going to drop $200 million on an OTEC plant that's going to be a complete financial loss. But if you can cut those losses down to $30 million, which is where we're estimating, and then the end state is, well, if you get through that $30 million loss, there's $3.5 trillion worth of annual energy to sell. Yeah. Oh, that's a risk, right? The risk reward is pretty good there. It's just getting through that 10 megawatt phase. Nobody's been willing to take complete financial loss. I mean, shit, Uber's still not making money, and people have been pouring money into that for a long time.
Yeah, Google famously didn't make any profit for a long time.
Yeah, same with Twitter. So
that too, yeah. Tech companies can get away with it. Heavy industry is a little different. Do you have an estimate for what the price of Bitcoin would need to be, like, on average over, let's say, 10 years for this to work?
Not zero. It doesn't. Yeah, it really. The price of Bitcoin doesn't really matter. It's mostly about just not losing everything, not being a complete financial loss.
I see. But if you wanted to be profitable, like on the other side of this prototype, you've got 100 megawatts, and the president of Earth says, "All right, Nathaniel, what's it going to take? Like, what's your projection for the price of Bitcoin? What would it actually take for this to be profitable and to maintain it long term?"
So the LCOE, so the levelized cost of energy at the 10 megawatt, equatorial grazing OTEC is about 10 cents per kilowatt hour, which is a little high for Bitcoin mining at any time. But it has been at that, that would have been profitable if you had started mining back in 2019. If you were mining today, it would have paid for itself off. So 10 cents per kilowatt hour is about the break even, and whatever that equates to in terms of Bitcoin mining price versus the difficulty.
Do you need a dynamic and knowledgeable speaker for an event? Thomas Fry and me, Trent Fowler, are both seasoned keynote speakers, able to converse on a wide array of topics to audiences of all sizes and skill levels. Go to the contact page at futureaudypodcast.com to book Thomas or myself today, and let us apply our years of experience in public speaking to make your event a smashing success.
So what you're building is actually a floating power plant on the ocean. And so there's lots of cities that are right on the ocean that'd be more than happy to invest in that. So if you made 100 copies of this and sent it off to Cairo and Mumbai and a few other places around the globe, they would be happy to buy those to help with their lack of power that they have right now. So in addition to the Bitcoin mining, there's lots of other applications.
And there's, the existence of utility scale power in the middle of the ocean would lead to a revolution in ocean-based industries. Like I said, 45% of all the energy that arrives to Earth from the sun lands in the ocean. We talk about, factories in space. Everybody's talking about Elon Musk and, space mining and asteroid mining and, building factories in space, zero G. That's ridiculous. We have to do it in the ocean first, right?
We never talk about those things. We never talk about
all the minerals we need to build solar panels, batteries, all of our electronic devices can all be found in the ocean in greater abundance than terrestrially. We've known about them. They're called manganese nodules or polymetallic nodules, and they're little balls of metal, kind of look like this. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's a little ball of metal that can be found on the ocean floor. There's $60 trillion worth of manganese, cobalt, copper, and nickel. Just balls of metal sitting on top of the ocean floor. And we've known about these for the better part of 70 years. And Lockheed Martin has designed equipment to go mine them, and the UN has issued permits to a bunch of countries and corporations to go extract these minerals. The problem is that it has never been cost competitive with slave labor in the Congo. We like our cobalt, we like our phones, and the only place to get it at the moment is slave labor in the Congo. And turns out that the major cost component of going to get them is finding a crap ton of energy in the ocean. You got to truck diesel out to the middle of the ocean. Of course, the existence of utility scale power in the middle of the ocean changes that equation.
It just seems like the ocean people never talk to the space people much, and vice versa. Well, this is absolutely fascinating. We're running up toward the end of this episode here. Do you have some final words, some final thoughts on what you hope to accomplish over the next couple of years here?
Kardashev type 1.
Okay.
That is admirably ambitious.
Before we can even talk about space, we have to do we have to do everything here first. Space is irrelevant. It's a distraction. The ocean covers 70% of the planet. And, the only time you think about it is when you're at shore at the beach, or you're flying over it and you wish you were already at your destination. It's this flyover zone, but again, it's 70% of the planet. There are more minerals in the ocean. If we want to move to the hydrogen economy, OTEC is the only way to, produce green hydrogen at parity with steam methane reforming. There's just so many industries that you could build in the middle of the ocean at cheaper than you could build terrestrially.
Could you briefly go through those? Because I did want to ask you about the future of ocean-based industries. It doesn't have to be a thesis on each one, but sketch the picture for the audience.
Well, hydrogen production. So, I'm not a huge fan of hydrogen, but it seems like that's where the government wants to go. And you need to transport that hydrogen. So where do you get it from and where does it go, right? Well, you could either, you have ships and you send them, every country sends those ships up to Iceland, where you use the cheap electricity there, or, wherever to make green hydrogen. Or you just have a bunch of essentially gas stations at the equator producing hydrogen in situ. You have all the water, you have all the energy you need. So for factories, you could produce a lot of, energy intensive material, aluminum smelting, just 3 to 5 cent per kilowatt hour energy, almost an infinite amount of it. You could set up factories, you could do, desalination, you could do carbon capture and storage. One of the waste byproducts of OTEC, grazing OTEC, is carbon capture and storage. You're pulling up that deep cold water, which is super nutrient dense. And if you are to release that super nutrient dense water in the photic zone, you stimulate primary productivity, which pulls carbon out of the atmosphere. And then when those primary producers, the phytoplankton, die and sink down. They take that carbon with them. So as a waste product of all this, you can carbon capture and storage. I mean, anything that you produce on land could one day be produced in the ocean for cheaper.
Okay.
Wow.
Well, there you have it. We have all the answers right here on Earth. We don't have to go to space. And
we're already in space. Spaceship Earth is the best spaceship anyone could ever design. It's, you know, it's self-sustaining, right? For billions of years. You have all the land, all the water, all the air you ever need. You don't need to. Mars has none of those things. You know, it shields us. It shields us from the radiation. We need to take care of home first, right? And Bitcoin is the only way to get to type 1.
I like that. That might be the title of the episode. I haven't decided yet, but that's pretty compelling.
All right.
I love it.
Well, this is great.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. This is really, really compelling. A whole industry I didn't know anything about. I appreciate you walking us through it. And if you make any major updates or breakthroughs, let us know. You're welcome to come back anytime you want and talk about them.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, Thomas, we just wrapped our interview with Nathaniel Harmon. I wanted to ask you a question related to the tensions that he discusses with respect to mining in space versus mining in the ocean. So the sea or the stars, where do you see the future of mining? You've got 50 seconds minus what I've already used.
All right. Yeah, I see the future of mining being in both places. I think there's some opportunities in space that you're not going to get in the ocean. And as we grow communities in space, there's going to be a lot more opportunities there. So, but I do think he has a great point in saying that there's huge opportunities in the ocean that are just simply being overlooked.
Well, there you go, guys. The answer is both. Don't forget to like the episode and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you next time.